kind of relatively young, but it it's bad. Every time I have to do any conversation communicating with anyone inside of like a big company, like if it's not a small business, it takes like half my day. Like God forbid
So, what did your wife and you come up with as the reason?
DEI probably. That would be my guess. I think they're not actually, and I think it's a system that's designed with too much technology. Like nobody can ever actually do anything. Have you noticed that? Like you call somebody and they're like, "Oh, I gotta hold on 1 second, sir. I gotta get my manager," and then their manager is, got to talk to, and they're never in the same building either. Like they're all working from home, so they're not even like going to get the manager physically. They have to like text them on Slack, or something, and then transfer the call. And then you talk to the next person. You have to restart the entire conversation if you can even get that far. Um, and I also think it has to be a coordinated effort. I mean, for insurance specifically, I've had a couple minor claims that I've had to make for dental, and I got like a filling, and they charged me when they said that they weren't going to charge me. And it was not even it was like $300, it's nothing to like break the bank about. But it took me like 12, I'm not even kidding. It took me like a year and probably like 25 hours of conversation with Delta Dental in Colorado to just get this one charge reversed. And it was so wrong. Like I knew they just were wrong. And so that's the only reason I followed up is because I was like, I'm not just going to let them. I know that it seems to me like the system is designed to get me fatigued and to just say, give up, and forfeit the $300 because it is worth it. In hindsight, it was worth it. It is worth it. It's not worth it to actually go through all the hoops, submit the claim, talk to the people. And in my case, what happened was I signed up for an insurance plan 3 months before I had a dentist appointment. And I knew in that dentist appointment they were going to give me a filling. And I was on the fence about even if I want insurance or if it's worth it. I've heard dentists tell me like it doesn't even matter. So some are like, yeah, it's on the fence. So I called Delta Dental in Colorado and I spoke to a customer service plan advisor. And I asked him straight up. I was like, here's my situation. I'm going to get a filling. If I sign up for this insurance, will it be covered? And they asked me a couple questions. And eventually the woman was like, yes, sir. Yep. Yes, it will. 100%. It will be covered. I gave him the date of the appointment and everything. This is before I even paid for the plan. And then I paid for the plan because they assured me that the procedure would be covered. Sure enough, I go to the procedure. I pay $400 at the dentist for the procedure. That was with the insurance coverage. So I was already like, okay, what am I even? I have to pay at the time of service. Then 6, 7 months goes by, and I get another bill for like $350 for the same thing. So it was like this thing that I thought was going to be free that ended up being $400 out of pocket plus $350 of additional charges that they say were denied by insurance. And so that started the whole process. And so what I ended up having to do is call them and request the phone records for my conversation with the original sales rep or whoever I talked to. But to get the phone record, because they always say that, I've noticed they always say, if you notice, like this is a recorded line, they record everything because they
And
legally.
they say it may be recorded for quality of. So maybe they say to you, "Oh, that one wasn't recorded."
Yeah. So, anyways, I call, and immediately when I start asking for that, then all of everybody's feathers go up. I go, I'm just calling to request the transcript of a call that I had. I didn't even call them to ask about because I tried, going, hey, I had somebody told me, oh, you have a claim. Sorry, sir, there's nothing I can do about that. sorry, sir, I'll transfer you to my manager. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Nobody ever knows anything. They can't look up anything. They can't see anything. So I was like, I know what this person told me. And so I just called, I just started, and I've done this now 2 or 3 times with customer service. If they have the ability, if most of them do record everything, that's what I've learned. And so that's what I do now. I just call and I'll say, hey, I want to request the transcript. And then everybody's all of a sudden like, then all of a sudden you're talking to their legal team. Then it's like I'm immediately forwarded to a lawyer who calls me like right away, which is good because at least they're giving me attention. They're at least talking to me and that there's somebody that is somewhat important. But it was this whole process, literally 25 to 30 hours to get one charge for $300 reversed. But it was the principles. It was the principles, Stu.
Well, when anybody ever tells you it's the principle, it's not the principle, it's the money.
Correct. Correct.
And, I told my kids, pennies make dollars, and they do. And $300 is $300. But if you got to spend 25 hours to get the $300, is it? Yeah, I guess it is.
Well, and the problem is you never know. When I started that whole process,
Right. You never know.
you don't know. Every hour you think, oh, this is it. There's no way I could keep getting
Right.
dead end after dead end after dead
And
end.
then you're deep enough in, you can't stop.
Exactly. I
So
was,
you think it's DEI that's causing this?
uh, yeah, I do. Everybody that I talk to seems incompetent. Um,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make sense like that. And that's what I've kind of deduced from DEI. DEI seems like they're just hiring people racially for quotas
Right. Based on
based
not their
on
qualifications, but the color of their skin or their religion or their ethnicity or what have you.
sexual orientation, which is the craziest one
Right.
to me. Um, yeah, and there just seems like an attitude. Like I would call all these people and they would have attitudes. Like it was like I was like calling on their personal phone number at home because they're giving me attitude. Like I'm the person that's like ruining their day or something. It's like I call in, well, why do you want to request a like they're literally like giving me like attitude, being
Right.
rude, not helpful at all. It's like I had to go through and take detailed notes on every call just to remind myself what I was because they would like gaslight me every time. I call back, hey, I talked to somebody yesterday about this, this, and this. What? Oh, we don't have that. That person doesn't even work here. What are you talking about? I don't know anything about that. And I was like, no, I have the exact time, the date, the duration of the call. I have their name. So that's what I started doing, just requesting phone records. But anything involving insurance really confuses me. And that really feels like the biggest scam.
Well, and the cost, I just paid my insurance bill and it was $16,000 for a half a year. So $32,000 a year for our cars and our houses. So I just talked to my insurance guy yesterday. I said, how is that sustainable? How does that, a person, that's a whole year's worth of income for most people, for some people. It's just crazy.
I know. And I'm young, so it's still cheap. I'm self-employed. I think we pay $1,200 a month for my wife and I, which is like a huge expense. I mean, it's like it's not insignificant, and it doesn't do anything. Like that's the thing that
Well,
frustrates me.
that's health insurance. What I'm talking about is not even health. Our health is another 2,000 a month on top of that.
Oh wow.
And so, I'm over 65, so I'm exploring how to get on Medicare. And then that'll go way down. But my wife is under 65, so we got to figure it out.
Yeah. Oh no, I had the whole, and it just seems like people are like the insurance. So I just moved to California, so I had to get California insurance, had to get new doctors. had to find dentists. My wife just broke her knee. So we've been kind of doing
Oh
the
boy.
like find how do you find somebody that's good? And it's just a disaster. Like we pay all this money to insurance and then you call them. You would think you'd be able to call the people that you pay 1,200 bucks a month and just say, "Hey, where can I find a doctor near me?" And like you can't even do that. They're like, "Oh, you got to go on this app. You go on this huge database. It's like the worst interface of a website that I've ever seen."
Right.
And then you
Because
go to
they
the
have
first,
to be careful that they're not directing business.
yeah, but then their website's not even accurate. Like the first five results, I just put in my zip code. I'm like, okay, I'm just trying to find a doctor near me. First five results come up. I call the phone number listed on my insurance's website.
Yeah.
Which, because how else am I gonna find a doctor that I know is covered by the insurance or in network? It's like yeah, of course I could call an individual doctor and then ask, but then they don't know the specific plan. It's like
Right.
you have to start with the insurance. That's my thought. And so I call the numbers that are listed first five numbers. None of them are even active numbers. What then the first one I get is like to a hospital. So I'm like calling, I'm like asking for like Dr. Johnson or whoever. And they're like, sorry, who are you talking about? This is like they're like, this is like the emergency room. Like it was like literally like a nurse in the ER. And they're like, no, there's no doctor named Johnson here. It's like, so I had to go. It was just I have this whole thing. And then you get there, you finally get a hold of the doctor, and then you go there and you got to pay for the visit. And we have like pretty good insurance. Like we didn't get the low end. It was like middle, but you got to pay for the thing, all the medications you got to pay for, you got to pay for any additional, and you can't get referrals to, she's going to physical therapy. She can't even go to physical therapy without a referral from a doctor. You,
Right. Yeah. That's the same with us. And then we've got I think it's a $6,000 a year uh, deductible. So the first six that on top of your 2,000 a month, you got to pay the first $6,000 before insurance starts kicking in. It's crazy.
yeah, yeah. And it doesn't even work. Like that's the thing. I go to my new dentist and they're like, yeah, you shouldn't even use insurance. They tell me that insurance doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm never even sick. I'm always healthy. That's the thing that annoys me.
Well, yeah, because you're so young, you never have to go.
If I was up to me and I was a single man, I would probably not have insurance. A lot of my friends, I would say like half of my friends that are my age men.
They don't have insurance. It's risky because, something catastrophic and you're bankrupt.
Yeah. And that's the
You
only,
know, I mean,
but if it's something catastrophic, then my thing is, or the argument that I've had made to me, because I don't think I'm brave enough to do this, but I do know a lot of friends who are like, these guys are like mountain bike riders who are
right.
really injuring themselves. And they say, Matt, I ride my bike down these mountains. If I fall and I crack my head open, I become paralyzed, or whatever, I slit my wrist, the Hippocratic oath mandates that the doctors have to save my life. So I'm not going to die. And he said, and if I'm, a vegetable or whatever, basically they're like, I'll deal with the bankrupting expenses in that situation. To me, it's like you either pay up front, you're going to have to pay $500,000 throughout your life for medical expenses. It's like insurance is you just pay that in small increments for your whole life.
Yeah.
Or you don't do the insurance and you get in one car accident and then you're in $500,000 of debt immediately. And so it's kind of like, which one do
Yeah.
you want to go
It's
down?
part of the problem with the system because one of my buddies has a brother who is an ER doc or nurse, one or the other. works in the ER in Greeley, Colorado. And 80 to 100% of the customers they get are non-English speaking immigrants without insurance.
80%?
80, 80 to 100, depending on the day. So the system's fucked up. And then we just allow however many millions. I've heard 8 million, and I've heard up to 15 million people have entered the country since Biden's been president.
Yeah, at least. I've
They
seen it.
don't have insurance.
Nope. And they can
And
go.
now some cities like New York and Los Angeles are giving them free debit cards with a couple $1,000s loaded on, and free boarding in hotels that have been converted. And now I just read today the California has authorized reparations for
Really?
descendants of slaves.
I gotta look that up. I was having such a heated debate with my dad about that. Really?
With your dad,
Yeah. Reparations. Wow, I gotta find that article.
it was just
Oh my
you
God.
know, my homepage is on MSN, and MSN's got like 10 or 15 pages that scroll through, with daily news. And usually Biden said this or just stuff. And one of them was Gavin Newsom's picture, and it was about reparations that they just approved. I think it was like 3 billion. And this is in light of the state being so in debt and so underwater.
Oh yeah. Okay, I read this. I actually did read this that you're talking about. So they didn't. So it was in California. It was a Newsom operation. They did not set aside cash payments for descendants of slaves, but they funded with several, oh my gosh, $12 million to task forces to research the damage of like slavery and how it affects. So I think it's a clever it's a grift. I was reading it's like Scott Adams.
Griff,
It's like they know that the governor is gonna, Newsom is a political guy, obviously. Maybe he'll replace Biden in the race, who knows? But I heard Scott Adams saying like it's basically like they know that they can't do reparations, like they can't actually give reparations because so many people will be pissed off. And so but they also know that all the black people want reparations, not all of them, a lot of them. And so he's kind of like hedging, like he's funding, he's going, hey, go do some research on this problem. We're going to give you 12
uh,
million. It's not,
I didn't read it. I just read the sensational headline. So,
but
do
it's
you have
just,
any student debt?
what?
Do you have student debt?
No,
Does your wife?
nope.
So, doesn't it piss you off, or doesn't it just irk you that you paid your freight and other people are getting off scot free? What's fair about that?
No, what bothers me, yeah, no, it's not fair at all. But what bothers me the most is that I had to go, I couldn't even get into because, and in hindsight, I didn't realize this. I was a pretty good student. I grew up in Fremont, California, Silicon Valley, Bay Area. 3.7 GPA in high school or something, 3.5. Not like, I wasn't going to an Ivy League, but I didn't get into a single UC in California, like a University of California school, not a state school. I got into a few state schools, but like the big one, like, like UC Berkeley, UC at Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, um, and
UCLA.
UCLA. And I'm pretty sure it was because of affirmative action. That was like the prime 2009 or 2013. And I was like a minority in my high school. Like I was the only white, I was like, the white people were literally a minority at my high school. And in hindsight, it was definitely affirmative action that contributed to it. Maybe I just didn't have the GPA requirement, but that's a big reason I went to Colorado. And then I get to Colorado and everybody from the state of Colorado can go to CU Boulder. Like you can get into CU Boulder with like a 2.0. Like it's like the easiest.
Not anymore.
Yeah, really?
They make it easier for out of state kids to get in than in state because the tuition's so much higher.
Really? But even when I was there, which was not that long ago, you could still get in with a like most of basically the state seemed to it versus California, it seemed like there was
Not anymore, man. My daughter just went through it, and many of her friends were denied acceptance at CU with higher credentials than out of state kids that got in just like that because out of state tuition is so expensive at CU, and in state, I mean, it's expensive, but it's not out of reach. She didn't end up going there. I mean, we took the tour, and they started doing so many of their new policies that just ran opposite from how we think as a family. And so she she was a champion volleyball player, and she had this coach who was an All-American in Kansas. And so we went and visited the Kansas campus, and she loved it. We visited Texas and Kansas, and she just loved it. And so did we, frankly. And she got a great education, ended up with a great job, and yeah, so it was a good deal. And Kansas out of state and Colorado in state were about the same.
wow. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, Kansas was maybe like 10% higher than Colorado in state,
Wow.
and not indoctrinated with all the stuff that comes out of CU. I don't know. Did you remember when you were there a professor named Patty Limerick?
Oh, was she the one that brought the prostitute into the sociology class? Was that one? She was
No, no,
one
but
teacher that would always.
that's sort of, that's sort of typical. Uh, she was a middle of the road, cerebral, intellectual thinker who would occasionally, well, regularly write a column in the Denver Post. And she was just, she was one of my heroes. And she wrote something that wasn't even that bad. And some snowflake thought it was bad, and she ended up getting fired. This is the lady that started all these, the Center for the American West Culture Studies, and so on and so forth. And when that happened, I was on several boards at CU. I had to resign, and
Wow.
and my daughter didn't end up going there. Yeah, it's
Wow.
sort of sad. But we're becoming sort of a suburb of California with our government and our policies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you chose schools. Oh, hi, Chuck, by the way. We're
Greetings, Matt.
we're just coming in. You got a new can wrangle. Are you
I'm
on
in a
a,
different location.
hey, well, thanks for stopping by. Stu and I were just talking shop. No big
Somebody was working in my office, so I had to go elsewhere,
gotcha.
cleaning the carpets.
Well, hey, yeah. Well, Stu and I are just I got the invite out way too late this morning. I was behind schedule. So I was thinking maybe because I'm always confused on when this I'm not confused, but I'm not set on when the best time to notify people for a live thing is. I don't really like my system at all. Like my system
It
is
works for me, your system,
I,
so I think it works.
like an hour ahead? You like getting like an hour or
Yeah,
even,
an hour or two. I mean, you do it, sometimes you did it the day before, but I just have a reminder in my calendar that every Tuesday at 11, I've got an appointment.
Mhm.
My
And
suggestion, Matt, is that you send out an announcement Thursday or Friday and put it on their calendar. And then do like you're doing now, half an hour beforehand or an hour beforehand, send them a reminder. And that way I think it gets on the calendar with the first one and they mentally prepare for it, or they know they can't, and oftentimes will respond to no. But anyways, I think it helps to have one the week previous, late, and then the day of.
Yeah, that's, I would agree with that. But yeah, so anyways, we're just talking. Uh, we haven't even talked about tech at all, but I have a lot of stuff on the list, on the menu.
Let's
Kind of
do
a
it.
lot of rapid fire uh news stories. One of the things that we are witnessing is, in my opinion, what may be the biggest monopoly of all time, or maybe the final monopoly in the history of all monopolies. I was having this
NVIDIA.
Nvidia, no, close. Well, I mean, kind of, and it's obviously it's like a tech monopoly, and I realized this when I saw uh it didn't hit me until this morning when I read the headline that Apple was to, quote, observe on OpenAI's board of directors. OpenAI is the creator of ChatGPT, leading AI company in the US and probably the world in terms of brand. Um, as you know, Apple decided to forego creating their own AI, which was kind of surprising, not very Apple-like. Everybody kind of thought Google's making one, Facebook's making one, ChatGPT is their independent one. You would think that Apple would take this opportunity to make their own Apple AI, but they didn't. They decided not to. I still don't know why. I've done a little bit of research. Apple's like a black box. You can't really understand what's going on, but probably expensive, I would guess. It's probably really expensive, but that also doesn't make sense to me with Apple, because Apple, who has more money than Apple? But anyways, Apple decided to forego creating their own AI and decided to partner with OpenAI to basically incorporate ChatGPT into all of their products, starting with the next release of iOS 18. So you will only be able to get the ChatGPT enabled Apple features if you have, I believe, the new phone. I think it's like iPhone 15, which is the latest model and above and forward. So I have an Apple iPhone 14, so I probably won't be able to get to see the AI features. They announced that at their huge worldwide developers conference 2 weeks ago. We covered that a little bit, and I thought the announcement was kind of mediocre. Like, it was literally just like Chat GPT features put into iPhone with like a bunch of emojis and kind of like artistic image creation stuff that I didn't think was very useful. Maybe if you're an artist, it's more interesting. But anyways, there's a huge partnership between Apple and OpenAI. And the headline this morning was that Apple was going to have an observant seat, not a voting seat, on OpenAI's board. It was interesting that they used that term. And I was like, right off, my first impression was like, okay, well, what does that mean? First of all, Apple's not just observing, right? If they're doing this deal with OpenAI, I have a hard time believing that they're just going to passively, maybe that's their official position, just passively observe what the board of OpenAI is doing. But Apple is literally using this as their main update for every single one of their devices going forward. So they have a huge stake in the company. And I was like, wow, so these are obviously, they're tied at the hip. Maybe they're observing, maybe not. But OpenAI, we must not forget, is owned by who, or majorly funded by who?
Microsoft.
Google.
Microsoft. So we now have like this like alliance of Apple. It used to be Apple versus PC. It used to be Windows versus Mac, and those commercials of like, I'm Mac,
Right.
the PC, like, and it was like this war. And now it's like all of a sudden all these lines are blurred. It's all coming together into one mega AI smartphone monopoly, is what it kind of feels like to me. And the last piece is robots. I think the war to the robots, or the race to who can create these robots, whatever they will look like. I'm not sure if they'll be humanoid, like looking like humans, or if they'll be kind of like the R2D2 ones that we've looked at. It kind of seems like that's the final race. Like, and there's lots of reports. One of the other articles I have today is China's War of 100 AIs, and they're talking about the AI business landscape in China, and how basically China has like a huge, like 100 companies that are all making these learning language models, AI models, so chat GPT equivalents, and they have 100 of them, and they're all like competing, I guess. That's what it seems like from the article. So that's what's going on in China. And it's a very competitive landscape. There's lots of issues with China producing AI, because a lot of the chips that are manufactured by NVIDIA in Taiwan have sanctions. And so they're not able to fully harness the power, because it takes a lot of computing power. So there's a whole race going on. And it's like China versus the world, basically, for who can create both AI and I think also robots. Yeah, and robots will use AI, so it'll be kind of the same, it's kind of the same. AI is the new technology of the future. And I had this thought, I'm like looking at the US, and it's like the US just seems like a monolith now for AI companies. Like every tech company is one. Apple and Microsoft are one. OpenAI is using Apple and Microsoft. And we're the capitalist free market country, and we look like China. It's like the roles are reversed. China looks like the US that I was learning about in school, where there's tons of competition and there's lots of companies competing and creating new innovation products, and you don't really know who's going to be on top. And then I look over at the US, and the US is just like Apple. Like it's like everything goes to Apple or Microsoft. And I just thought that was an interesting observation that I had. So China's looking like more free market, more competitive.
And does NVIDIA make the chip for AI?
NVIDIA makes the best chips. Yeah, the biggest, most advanced.
So are they part of that cabal with Microsoft and Apple?
Yeah, and they're headquartered in Taiwan. So that's the
They're a Taiwanese company.
yeah, and so
I
that's the
didn't know that.
so it's kind of that's where it's getting interesting, because everybody thinks China's going to take over Taiwan pretty soon. Every
Right.
that I've seen sounds like they will. Um, so yeah, so it's kind of
Well, a lot of it'll depend on who gets elected.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so anyways, that's Apple observing on OpenAI's board. Do you guys think like does that seem has it always felt like the USA is a monopoly driven country? Like when I look, and I know I'm just biased because I look at tech. Tech is very fascist, authoritarian, in like it's just like the kings rule everything in tech. Apple and Microsoft, Amazon dwarf everybody else. Like me and you and Chuck can make a computer company. Yeah, maybe we can, probably not,
If
right?
it's successful, you get bought by Amazon or Google or
Yeah.
Apple or yeah,
So
because you don't exist for very long if you're successful.
yeah, and so I don't know
But
if it's tech or if it's like business in general, but to me, it seems like tech kind of eats all the other parts of business. And so it was interesting to see these two articles side by side, because it was like, oh, China's got like all these like little companies, and they're battling it out. 100 companies making AIs. In the US, we have like three, four. And now they're all combined. Like now it's like Apple is combined with Microsoft. I don't know. That's not really like a very scholarly take. That's just my gut reaction when I was reading.
Matt, I think
I
you have to
understand.
get, Matt, I think you have to go to 30,000 feet on this one and say, what length of time are you talking about? I think this sort of agglomeration into the combination of Apple and Microsoft and ChatGPT and that's a very small period of time, 5 years. And yet this issue of how the structure of US technology industry is made up and what the history of it is more like 50 years. And even that is a absolutely spot in time. So I'm saying, no question about it, we're at a moment right now that has a lot of concentration, but we've had periods where there was domination before, and then it got more competitive because a whole new front opened up. NVIDIA is an example of, in 10 years, came from an asset that's worth, I don't know what it was, maybe $50 million to $3 trillion. That happened in 10 years. And so the landscape changed with that. And the US is also treating NVIDIA like a US technological proprietary interest, even though it's a Taiwanese company. So we're very much limiting what China has access to technologically, and we're doing that, in my opinion, Matt, much more than we did 15 years ago. Limiting technology, then if you go back to first Biden, or Trump, and then Biden, we were more open on China, but now it's a very much a Cold War moment. I don't know how long it'll last.
Yeah, it seems like it could be the final technological battle. Like people always say AI is going to reach artificial general intelligence, reach consciousness, and then whoever gets that first, like wins the game, right? Like it's like you have a genius. And the interesting thing is you only have to create it once. So maybe it's already created, maybe a government already has it. But if you reach this achievement as they theorized, you just have to do it once. It's like you get the doctor. If you make a perfect AI doctor, right? You only need one doctor for the rest of history. Um, and so I see this race like really mattering. Like it's like it seems like if there's one race that we can't lose as a country, it's the race to AI. And then number two, right underneath it is robots. And I think that's something that nobody is really talking about. There's lots of articles. The last 3 weeks I've been talking about robots. We've been looking at robots. Still it seems like really far away from having a robot in our house. But there's way more robots now than ever before. We were talking last week about Amazon hiring 750,000 robots. Um, Tesla's working on robots. Apple's working on robots. There's like humanoid robots that can do construction and go into buildings and like perform firefighting activities. Military, then you don't even, that's not even talk about what the military would have. But it kind of seems like robots and AI, it's like one of those races where if you lose it, you're losing. It's kind of similar to me, like the nuclear race.
To
Maybe not.
me, Matt, a robot is AI with just a bunch of hardware.
Correct.
That's it. And so NVIDIA was a little chip company that made a chip for gamers. That's how they got their start, is just video games. And they've grown a video game chip company into what it is today somehow. And somehow the United States has lost its ability to have inventive chip companies on shore. I don't know what happened. All of that technology and manufacturing, maybe it's the ecological effect. We don't make solar panels because it's too environmentally destructive or potentially destructive. We don't make chips. And I'm thinking there's got to be something environmental about that. And so maybe we've regulated ourselves into this second world status by making the industries that create the future have to leave and go do them somewhere where there aren't the same restrictive policies around what they're doing. That's the only thing I can feature in my mind.
I have two thoughts. One, I'm not as pessimistic as you are, Stu, that that we are in a nadir scenario. And Matt, I can't believe that this is the end point. There's never been an end point for technology. So yes, it seems like AI and robots are a huge new frontier, and we don't see much beyond that new frontier. But my guess is it is much more in the neural world, and that we have the capacity at that point have the capacity to have humans much more competent and powerful because of all the electronic connections we can make to their brain. That makes it very bad for a world where there's dictatorships of evil people. That would be frightening if they had that power as well. Meaning that they happen to be the ones with the super brain and the super technological connections. Bottom line, I'm not as pessimistic. I feel that we, in fact, are in the front end of the AI world, and that of all places in the world, the epicenter of technological knowledge is the Silicon Valley in the United States still. And I think there are a half a dozen to a dozen other epicenters of technology, Boulder being one of them, Austin being one of them. So I'd rather be in the U.S. holding the U.S. cards than any other player, including China, if I was in a poker game.
Right. But all of those companies that reside in Boulder and in Silicon Valley and wherever they are using devices that are run by a Chinese chip. And
It's a
so
Taiwanese chip,
a
Taiwanese chip, but
Taiwanese chip, I call that China. Um,
and it may be Matt, and that's part of the fear. I get it.
yeah. And so how are we in control? We're not in control. I mean,
Well,
that's we're a little puppet on a string that can be manipulated however Taiwan or China or whoever it is who's going to control Taiwan wants. I mean, we got to start figuring out how to manufacture those chips here.
isn't
I
there a
mean, why
huge
can't we? Our manufacturing capabilities are equal to Taiwan. Our our workforce is equal to Taiwan, I think, if you eliminate DEI. And my kids would say, "What's up with that?" Oh, I don't understand it.
It's got to follow the money. It's just cheaper to do it in China. I think that's Apple's the most wealthy company ever created, or Amazon, because they know how to make a profit. And I think
That's a good point.
no, I agree. I'm not actually being pessimistic, Chuck. I think I was being hyperbolic because it's kind of fun to be hyperbolic when you imagine
right?
this race to AI. I do think it's a big deal. My personal feeling is still the same. I don't think we're going to see like computers become conscious. I don't think we're going to reach AGI, artificial generative intelligence, which really means AI that can train its own data, that can train and create its own data. Right now, we have to give the data to the AI for it to be smart. And then it's limited by the data that we give it. AGI is like more human-like, where we create our own data. We can walk in the park and see a tree and say, wow, that tree's, inspiring me now to write a book, and this book is going to be inspired by something else. You know, it's like we're constantly creating the data that our mind computer is being trained on. I don't think we're that far. I don't think we're going to get there in the way that it's advertised ever, maybe. And I feel that way. That's just my gut
So,
feel. But I think that there's a couple other stories that kind of show the pendulum. So I've been alive barely long enough to see like how the pendulum kind of swings in both directions. And so on one hand, I'm talking about us going to artificial general intelligence, AI, robots. Everybody's going to live online. We're all going to be on TikTok. Nobody's going to read books. You know, the technological advancement is inevitable and all consuming. But sometimes it helps to take a step back and realize that there is actually a pendulum swinging in the other direction also. And a couple of these stories illustrate that with AI. First of all, one of the really interesting articles from, who is this from? Too many tabs open. Oh, yeah. From Advanced Science. They were talking about how neuromorphic chips work. So if you buy a new Apple device, you've probably heard them talk about like their neural engine CPU, GPU. They're not calling it, they specifically are calling it neural 18 core, 24 core neural engine CPU chip. M4 chip is loaded with like 24 what they call neural. And it's a new thing. And basically this article by Advanced Science is talking about how the most cutting edge computer chips are just based off of how our brains work. And it's like a crappy version of how our brains work. Our brains are incredible at processing things and using very little energy. And so they're talking about these neural engines and how they're just literally based off of like the brain architecture that we have and the neurons that fire around our brain. So that was one interesting like tidbit of like, you know, it's kind of like, we don't realize how much technology we have in our brain. Another one. You might have noticed that psychedelic therapy, plant psychedelics therapy is incredibly popular and gaining in popularity. Which is like the opposite of, and they're saying like people can do ketamine therapy and like completely stop addiction to cigarettes or alcohol, like with like
microdosing mushrooms.
microdosing mushrooms. You know, plants are completely like freeing people up, curing their depression, their anxiety. We also have oh, this is actually a really cool one. AI is now reading, they're saying AI can now read images from thoughts. So to help patients that are in like paralysis or in a coma when they're nonverbal, but they still have brain activity, they're using AI and basically the image generation tools that like ChatGPT has, some version of that, to translate people's thoughts into images, like their brain waves into images. That was pretty cool. I don't know how that seems a little bit out there.
Matt, think about how with the database that's being created about patterns of the brain and neurological patterns of the brain. And right now, these little individual experiments throughout the country and probably the world. But 5 years from now, there may be 1x now of those images, but then there may be a million X images, and then you start looking for patterns within it. So that ability to take somebody who's comatose, but still brain functioning and look at what their brain is saying, it's going to get better.
Yep.
As the database gets better, as we get more, captures of activity and brain patterns, and I'll bet you we will be able to do exactly what you said, and that is listen to somebody who's comatose. And it may be total gibberish because that may be with the status of that brain, but it may not be.
Yep. And one of the most probably feared, most common diseases of aging is Alzheimer's, right? Like that's
Right.
like And I read it. There was another story today. I can't find it. I have too many, but there's been several, if you're following that category, several huge advancements in Alzheimer's treatment. And I was blown away that like years ago, for like over 5 years, we've had the ability to like scan your eye and we can tell if you're going to have something like 20 years in advance. We can tell if you're going to get Alzheimer's or something. And which was like super scary. Like I remember hearing about that because it was like, well, we don't know what to do about it, but we can scan you and see if you're going to get Alzheimer's. And I was like, I don't even want to know unless we have a treatment, that sounds like a terrible thing. But now, of course, with Neuralink, with these chips that are going into people's brains, they're thinking that they might be able to reverse some of the most terrible diseases that we have, brain diseases.
Man, I've got a question. It's a little bit off topic, but sort of relates. All of this data and information's got to be stored somewhere. It was like when you were telling me that your conversation's recorded, and they record so all of that stuff's got to be stored somewhere, and I guess it's called the cloud. And so there must be data centers all over the world, or maybe they send them up to a satellite. That's what I'm thinking.
No, they're in
And
yeah, you're right. Data centers, huge warehouses of computers, basically underground, miles
right,
and
which take massive amounts of electricity that we're trying to, phase out power plants. And so there's this war of producers versus consumers going on, and they're going to send it somewhere, maybe up in space. And so yesterday I read that the environmentalists are trying to shut down SpaceX because SpaceX yesterday launched their super rocket. I think they call it Starliner, something like that. And the effect it has on, the water levels or the heat on the rocks nearby or something is causing some bad environmental catastrophe. So they want SpaceX to go away. And I'm just all of this. That's what scares me is that we're going to put ourselves out of business. And all of this stuff is going to happen in places where SpaceX can launch their rockets, which doesn't seem like it's going to be Houston or Orlando.
yeah. Well, this is where all the data is stored. You are right. It's like stuff like this. Like it's just like, so it is physical places, and these obviously take tons of electricity,
And probably air conditioning.
and air conditioning. But that's like,
Big time.
if you want to like kind of just imagine something pretty incredible. That picture that I just showed is like all of everything we know, right? All of our records, all of our data, all of our information, all of our books, all of our history, all of our systems that require that our society requires to function are just stored on computers. Now they're all backed up in very complicated ways, and so it's not like if you just bombed one.
What if the power goes out? There's got to be redundancy, doesn't there?
Yeah, they're incredibly complex in their ability to back up, and if you look at it, it's like they're all backed up in like 1,000 different places,
Okay.
across the globe. If you look at the fiber optic cables, I mean, I wouldn't say across the globe, but the backup, it's not as easy to just like shut off the power and erase everything. But there is a lot of people that are concerned about that. Because we
So
don't,
Matt, you should,
nothing is written down, basically. Like that, I was reading something, it's like 90% of everything that we have is digital. Like and if we lose computers, I don't know how we lose computers, but you could. You imagine something.
Matt, you showed a picture of a room. And I would bet you the storage capacity, those servers that you showed, I'll bet you the worldwide storage is 10,000 times that one picture. Am I in an order of magnitude correct, or am I crazy?
No, probably low. It's probably
Yeah.
100,000. Yeah, probably like 100,000.
So,
Like if you
so
took the,
Matt, there,
I don't know.
or Steve, Stu, there's a huge amount of redundancy. And moreover, it's like we've got this huge beach, it's all sand, and we've strewn within that sand information. How do you ever, or on an organized fashion, go catalog and know all that stuff and how much of it's redundant and how much of it's duplicated? And so if you lose something, I'm not certain how much you really lose because they're not interconnected totally. It's the way you lose it is if you get some virus that can go from one to another and destroy the records, get into a new dark ages type of
Or somebody
process.
attacks the grid.
Yeah. Yeah, you could, there are definitely ways to get in there and do major damage. To me, it's like a library, you
Yeah.
know, it takes a lot longer to build the library than to burn it down. And that's
Right.
what it doesn't, it's like, there's people out there that are amazing hackers and amazing.
Matt, I think I just had my $1 million idea. The light bulb went on. I'm in the real estate business. Why don't we develop a data center or 10 of them or 20? I mean, it the amount of data that we create every day. I mean, it used to double every 10 years and then it doubled every 10 minutes and now it doubles every 10 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, they changed it. That law, like it was like a law, I think, that
Right.
microchips, and basically we like advanced so far past it that it's not even like correct anymore. I
So
forgot.
that one room that you saw that there's 10,000 other ones, according to Chuck, we're probably going to need 100,000 more.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the problem is putting them in a place that
Yeah.
has good redundant electricity to it, because that's the key. If somebody snips the line to that building, it's out of business.
Yep. Yep. Or you just make one super AI using an NVIDIA super chip, train it on all of the data, and then you're good forever.
Yeah, but where do you store it? You can't store it in
Oh,
that
yeah,
chip.
this
It's got
AI
to be stored somewhere.
you put it in a robot, you make it like a huge robot like the Transformers, so nobody can really break it. It can fire, destroy everything if it needs to. But
The robot would have to be the size of the Chrysler building.
yeah, well, I mean, that's at least that's probably, we need 100 of the Chrysler buildings just for all the storage. Yeah, and it's going even more, like all of the storage we already do now without AI. Basically, they keep saying AI requires more energy and more data and more storage than you can even imagine, like because it's doing so much computing. So we have to add that onto the top of all of the stuff we're already doing on our phones, like sending texts and emails and photos and taking videos of everything. Um, and so that's a huge concern. Like people are actually concerned about their grid, and they think that we, as of right now, do not have a grid to support the energy usage. That's
No shit. I mean, Texas's grid went down in an ice storm because they moved their reliance to windmills. A lot of it, a huge percentage of it, maybe 20% or something like that. And
yeah.
they iced up in the winter. They couldn't spin. Uh, yeah,
And I
our
heard
grid
I've
is
listened to some grid.
that's our America's vulnerability is our grid.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson, I saw a clip of him talking about, and I don't know how true this is, but he was talking about the grid and how it's so complicated. Like the US power grid is just like almost like a wonder of mankind that we even
Right.
created it. And they're saying like there's reports that are like basically saying like we don't know how to recreate the grid. Like if it were to go down, like the people who created it have died. And his thing, he was being a little bit, I think, like hyperbolic, but
Hyperbolic, yeah.
But it was an interesting thing to think about. He's like, I don't even know if we have the people to recreate it. I don't usually agree with that. I feel like it's a slow moving problem. Any problem that's slow moving enough, even if it feels impossible today, if we know it's going to be a problem, I feel like we can figure it out. Climate change falls into that category for me. Power grid falls into that category for me. Even AI and robots like taking over society and killing us all, that falls into that slow moving problem.
Climate change, I agree with you, but the grid, our enemies just seem in the last year or two to be more emboldened. And we're in a more fragile position globally than we were before, just in our response to attacks. And yeah, some smart person, either with a bomb or his brain, disables our grid, boy. I think we need to bolster our military and our capabilities of keeping bad guys out.
Yeah.
Stu, the next war will be as fought as much electronically and and basically involving our internet and grid security than it will tanks and bombs and nuclear submarines and airplanes. The war will be fought on that infrastructure site, and our ability to function as a nation, really gets down to how we're going to get stuff to eat. So I'm with you. I think the risk is huge if we get into a serious conflict. What we're doing now in cybersecurity and cyber attacks are always just test runs of what would happen if we multiplied that by 1,000 on that country with cyber attacks. So I'm with you, Stu. It's a huge problem, and I don't know how we'll fight that war. Hopefully, we don't get there.
Well, one would be to keep terrorists from coming into our country. And right now, we don't know who the hell's coming in, and there may be 5 million, there may be 15 million new people who've come in over the last couple of years. We don't know who the hell they are or where they are. Are they good? Are they? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what scares me.
I've noticed the huge difference in California, which is already a very like Mexican place. There is there is people from every like I go to a restaurant and like the waiter doesn't even speak English.
Right.
Like actually, like I go to the hardware store. I went to Safeway. I was going to get some bread. I go up to a person in the bakery because I always do this, and I'm like, "Hey, which one's the freshest loaf?" They always know as they're packing it. The woman didn't even understand. She didn't even. She looked at me like I was speaking Chinese, and she didn't even know enough to say that I don't speak English. She just kind of like said something in Spanish and walked away. I've noticed a huge difference in.
Same here. It's happening here in Colorado.
Yeah, but anyways, I gotta go. It's already
Uh,
I do too.
good one.
thanks for coming, guys. That was fun. We'll be back.